Մարդկային կյանքը կարճ կամ երկար իր վախճանն ունի, բայց ինչպես մեծ Ընթումանյանն է ասում, գործն է անմահ, լավ իմացեք, որ ապրում է դարեդար, երնեք նրան, ով իր գործով կապրի անվերջ անդադար։ Մեր այսօրվա հաղորդումը ներկայացնում է հայ մեծ անհատի, ով թեև հրաժեշտ է տվել այս կյանքին, բայց թողել է իր բարի անունը, իր վառ հիշատակը եւ իր գործերը, որ կապրեն անվերջ անդադար։ Դոկտոր Ռաֆի Հովհաննեսյանի հիշատակին նվիրված երեկոյին տարբեր քաղաքներից, երկրներից մարդիկ էին ժամանել, մեկ անգամ եւս հիշատակելու եւ իրենց հարգանքը մատուցելու մեծատառով հայ մարդուն դոկտոր Ռաֆի Հովհաննեսյանին։ Հուշ երեկոն տեղի ունեցավ Նյու Յորքի Սուրբ Վարդան տաճարում։ Այն սկսվեց հոգեհանգստյան արարողությամբ։
We were privileged to know the late Dr. Raffi Hovanessian personally, to work with him during his many years as a leader of the Eastern Diocese, serving as a member of its diocesan council and on the board of the Fund for Armenian Relief. We witnessed his leadership of numerous consequential undertakings, all of which made important contributions to the life of our church and to the progress of the Armenian American community. As a renowned physician, he devoted his medical expertise and humanitarian compassion to the benefit of countless fellow Armenians, most notably in his own fatherland of Armenia, where his contributions greatly advanced the field of medicine and medical education.
Դոկտորին մահը պատահեցավ այնպիսի ժամանակը, երբ իր ընտանիքն ու շրջանակը համաշխարհային առողջապահական ստիպողական պայմաններու բերումով չկարողացան արժանի հարկանք մատուցել իր հիշատակին։ Քորնագություն է մեզ համար դեսնել, որ ներկայի համեմատաբար նվազ խիստ պայմաններու մեջ ծրագրած եք հատուկ հիշատակի ցերնագոմը հարկել դոկտորին հիշատակը եւ լուսարձակի դակ բերել այն կարևոր ներդրումը, որ ունեցավ դոկտոր Ռաֆի Հովհաննեսյանը, թե իր մասնագիտության եւ թե մեր եկեղեցվո ու Միացյալ Նահանգներու մեծ քարոզի զիրեններս։ Ակտարև որքան փակտվին իրենց կյանքն ու կորձը իրենց շրջապատին հետ նույնացված եւ շրջապատով հարստացված մարդոց այս աշխարհեն հերացումը անոնք երբեք չեն գտնար ըսվերի դակ բերել անոնց թողած ծառայական ժառանգը ու սիրելի ներկայությունը։ Դոկտոր Ռաֆին իր ողջ կյանքի ընթացքին եղավ հավասարակշռված անձնավորությունը, որուն համար հայ եկեղեցին, ազգն ու հայրենիքը մնացին անկերազանցելի արժեքներ, հարգեց իր շրջապատը եւ հարգվեցավ բոլորեն անխտիր։
Raffi was always a man of action, with an active mind, an outgoing personality, and incredible energy that took him all over the world and drew him in every endeavor, whether in medicine, community service, philanthropy, or the arts. Raffi lived life to its fullness, and he loved to be active and engaged. At the same time, Raffi understood from his early days that to live a life of consequence, a man must be grounded in the foundation that is stable, secure, unshakable. For Raffi, that foundation lay is service to God and to his church. This is what gave him life, balance, and conviction. It was his source of strength and energy. And it was the inspiration for the great power of love that flowed from Raffi's heart and touched everyone.
Raffi lived his life for his family. He lived his life for his friends. He lived his life for the needy. He lived his life for his country. He lived his life for his God, but he never lived his life for himself. As you all know, Raffi was a man of utmost integrity and just impeccable moral character. Character is who you are. It's what you do when nobody's watching. Reputation, on the other hand, is who people think you are. And for most people, their reputation exceeds their character because they spend a lifetime cultivating a superior image of themselves. Raffi was one of those unique few whose character was actually exceeded his reputation. Why? Because he always did everything quietly without any fanfare. I mean, to say that Raffi was a generous man might be today's understatement, for he helped so many people, many of whom he didn't even know, and many times without even Shorak knowing about it.
I moved to the States in 1960, 5 years before he did. He would write me nearly every week. Recently, I reread those letters that I had saved. The one from March 1965 is very poignant and shows how going to church changed his life. Raffi wrote, "I'd gone to church during Vartanans, and a girl came and stood in front of me. I don't know how, but I know this is the girl. Of course, she was beautiful, tall, and elegant. For the first and only time in my life, I waited after church to have a nice look and decide, and trying to see if somebody knows who she is. You better know her name, because God willing, she's going to be your sister-in-law. Her name is one that has always been very romantic to me, Shoag." So the church fulfilled not only his spiritual needs, but also provided him with the person he would cherish for the rest of his life.
By the time Raffi enrolled in medical school at the American University of Beirut, his life had been entrenched in a race towards excellence and goodness, an early life experience which he carried forward to the end. In Beirut, Raffi joined Bishop Karakin Sarkisyan, later Karakin II of the House of Cilicia, and Karakin I of all Armenians in Echmiadzin, to establish a home, Հայաստանյաց եկեղեցվո համասարանական ուսանողներու միություն, the Armenian Church University Students Association in 1963, and fought for the rights of Armenian students of all denominations to be eligible for membership. Raffi has been a brother, a friend, an advisor, a counselor, and a man of God. He has illuminated many paths in life. I am honored to say I too have had him as my role model.
Philanthropy was in Raffi's blood. His generosity is unsurpassed, and believed in giving generously for good causes with love and grace. He was a team player, always consulted with his wife Shoag. They worked together on so many charitable events. For example, after the earthquake in Armenia, Raffi and Shoag non-stop raised funds for the victims and mobilized the entire Chicago community. Raffi also regularly organized fundraising activities for US politicians from both parties who were supporters of the Armenian causes.
So when I was applying to medical school at age 21, I consulted Uncle Raffi about the otherwise daunting application process. His calm demeanor and reassuring tone dissipated any concerns I had about getting accepted to medical school and propelled me to succeed. Since then, as a result, I became inspired to help dozens of applicants pursue their dreams for college and medical school. Over the years, I consulted him about many professional matters. For example, 12 years ago, I asked him about a new treatment for depression that required magnetic stimulation of the brain. He encouraged me to undertake this new revolutionary path. Since then, that treatment has saved hundreds of lives. The last time I saw Uncle Raffi was about 3 years ago when we were driving through New Jersey and we stopped by for lunch. My daughter, who was in medical school at the time, was with us. He immediately gravitated towards her and discussed internal medicine with her. I sat back and watched, and I realized that his mentorship had come full circle and had now transcended to future generations of physicians in the family.
To the Archbishop's family and friends, it's an honor to be welcomed into this community to share a few of the thoughts on Dr. Hovhanessian that I've had many thoughts over the past years. I met Dr. Hovhanessyan on September 3rd, 2013, and said goodbye to him a little after the worst of the pandemic had passed over our beloved city. I knew him for just shy of 7 years, and though this was far longer than what the best science would have predicted at the time, it was far shorter than what seemed just, a reminder of the inescapable shadow that lingers over this world. I am grateful that I met him in what to me seemed were the golden years of his and Shoag's life together, after the gentle labors of the sanctifying work of the Spirit and a gracious and loving family formed the man that sought counsel from me those many years ago, and from whom I gleaned much about the truth of this life.
Over the past 25 years, Mezbah gave us all, as his grandchildren, seemingly unlimited time. It was his dream to experience and give the love of a grandparent, because, as he used to share with me, he never met his grandparents as they were lost in the genocide. As much of a role model, humanitarian, and hero that he was happiest when he was able to connect with us grandchildren at our level. Whether it be spontaneous fishing trips to Uncle Zorab's in Fort Wayne, or buying enough fireworks for the Macy's Day Parade during our annual Mezbah Camp summer retreat, at his core, Mezbah was happiest and put his role as a grandfather above all else. During the last year and a half of Medz's life, I had the unique opportunity to move in and look after him. Reflecting back on that period, I learned about what it meant to be a brother, father, husband, and grandfather, simply by watching the way he conducted himself.
Dad taught us that family is everything. This devotion to family was rooted in his youth. In 1965, Syria nationalized my grandfather's shoe factories, and my dad told us in one day they lost everything. My dad was very angry. He wanted to go back and fight so he could get the factories back. That night around the dinner table, his father, our grandfather, said, "Son, look around the table. Your mother, your brothers, your sisters. You are all that is important to me. We have each other, we have our health, and we can always build back another factory." This story was repeated to the three of us at different times, at difficult times in our own lives, and we always knew that we had each other, we had our family.
My father's professional life can be summed up in 2 words. You've heard them: first and chief. He skipped 3 grades in secondary school, first in his class at AUB, chief resident, AUB Medical School, chief resident, chief GI fellow, Johns Hopkins, chief of staff, hospital in Indiana, chief physician for Carequin Catholicos I. Besides being first and chief in just about everything, he was always very humble and giving of his time, and expertise. As I scan around this room, I wonder how many of you have tapped my father's shoulder at some point and whispered, "I need your help," having a mystery symptoms or ailment that other physicians or specialists could not diagnose, and yet he figured out. He would tell us, "Listen to the patient," and listen he did. And then miraculously, out would come out a magic bullet out of his pocket, a heart medicine, antacid, Tylenol, whatever it was, whatever was necessary. He had a veritable mobile pharmacy in his pocket.
And then there were the calls at all hours of the day and night. He was always ready and willing to help. But sometimes my mom would triage the calls if Dad was not home yet. So Dr. Vicky would give her advice, and after all those years of as a doctor's wife, she really was well trained. Dad would come home, he'd hear this, raise his eyebrows, nod his head. He was pretty impressed.
The funniest in the last few years was that our mom was convinced her magical green juice, which was a concoction of anything green and edible, was the magic elixir, along with Dr. Peck's miraculous medical treatments, which was prolonging Dad's life. But one day we noticed something. The green juice was actually brown. And we said, "Dad, what's happening?" He had secretly been putting in his beloved Diet Pepsi each morning because the green juice unfortunately didn't taste so good, but he loved our mom so much that he dutifully drank it each morning. But on a more serious note, our dad was truly a fierce risk taker. Once he educated himself in a field, he dove straight in. From the stock market to the opera to the Chicago Bulls and Bears and travel. But for us, it was truly most evident when it came time to collecting contemporary art. It took incredible courage for our parents to collect contemporary art when they did in the mid-'80s. Once they educated themselves, they traveled the world, met artists, gallerists, joined museum groups. They shared a passion for collecting, and they continued even when their friends would tease them, when they would look at the paintings on the wall and say, "Did Eileen paint that? I think she could paint that better." Well, I certainly couldn't paint as great as these artists. But this passion and this drive for contemporary art carried over into helping and supporting Armenian artists all around the world as well.
My dad read all the time, and he had a photographic memory. He would carefully underline and annotate important passages in the Bible. He taught us that education is power, and from the time that we could start reading, he would start clipping and cutting out articles from newspapers and magazines, jotting our name on the corner. And, these would be left on our bed, on a desk, in a care package to college. I mean, you see, this was before the internet. My father was curious about everything. He wanted to know everything. It would be a major medical discovery, a new emerging artist, advantageous tax strategies. Before Google, there was Raffy.
Dad was always on the cutting edge, as Eileen said and Armin mentioned, but we could always depend on Dad. Despite being on the cutting edge, we knew he'd be impeccably dressed in a suit and a tie, and undoubtedly his conventional Florsheim shoes. It didn't matter if he was making rounds at the hospital, he was coming home from work, going to church, teaching us how to throw free throws or kick a soccer ball. He was always dressed in a suit and a tie. And in that inner suit pocket, he always carried 3x5 index cards and extra pens so that he could write a note, jot a phone number, or give himself a reminder. That was Dad.
You could set your clock on my father. He was so punctual, and a man of his word. He taught us the value of being trustworthy and held us to account for all of our commitments. If you remember, he told us, trust is hard to earn and easy to lose. If you asked him to be somewhere after a school activity or meet you for dinner, he was always there, on time or 5 minutes early.
And wherever we were in the world, Dad loved to speak to everyone. The waiters, the flight attendants, our teachers, friends, strangers, it didn't matter. He was curious to learn about your story. And if Dad found out you are Armenian, oh my goodness. He is going to break down your family tree until he inevitably finds your fourth cousin who taught his uncle at AUB and some type of a relation. He always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. And looking around here today, it's a testament for us of the deep friendships and meaningful relationships that our dad established.
As you've heard, my father was a mentor to a vast number of people throughout his life. He had the mind of a teacher, the heart of a preacher, heart of a healer, and the soul of a preacher. He taught by example, and he was the first to give of himself whenever he saw someone in need.
It was just in his DNA. Whether it was our beloved housekeeper, the gardener, fellow church parishioners, family, friends, anyone in need. He understood what it meant to need a lifeline, and he did whatever he could to help.
My father received his deployment papers for Vietnam to serve on a very special day. My mother was in labor with me. Despite the stressful situation and moment, my father told her that he was proud to serve America wherever he was needed, because America had given so much to us already.
He loved America, he loved Armenia, he loved life. Our dad loved telling jokes, he loved to sing, he loved to take us to the arcade, he loved to play cards with us, he would swirl us around the dance floor. As you heard, he loved to get groups together at parties, and he would start singing and get everyone in the sing-along. We'd like to conclude on a beautiful lesson that our dad taught us in his final days. As the family surrounded him and the grandkids were questioning him with millions of different questions, we decided we had to think of our family motto. So for an hour, each of us in the family took turns trying to capture the essence of our family, each struggling to find the perfect sentiment. Dad went last, and he said, without hesitation, in his exact words, it's quite simple: love and respect. So we'd like to leave you all with these parting words that we hope will uplift your minds, your hearts, your spirits, as you all have done for us. Thank you so very much.
The church is in my cellular formation. I wanted, as a very young man, to be a physician and to be a missionary. I used to read about Albert Schweitzer, and to me, what he was doing in Africa was the noblest of noble things that I could think of. Maybe that's why the church has always been in me. I was born in Jerusalem. My parents were both survivors from the genocide. We were in Jerusalem for a short while, then transported to Aleppo during the Arab-Israeli war. So I grew up in Aleppo all the way through my 2 years of college. Our house was close to 7 different churches. The Latin church, the Greek church, the Armenian church, the Syrian church, the Armenian Catholic church, they all were in the same neighborhood. So we cherished the idea of the church being a second home to us. We also went from church to Sunday school, close to 300 kids in one Sunday school. My mother's name is Diruhi. She used to do midwifery in Aleppo for the poor families that did not have money to go to the hospital. My father's name is Arakel. They were both very religious people, very straightforward, hardworking, devoted Armenians. I used to tell my dad, how come you have 6 kids? He was a simple shoemaker. He says, we lost so many that this is the only way the Armenian race can succeed. If I analyze the fact that a 4 or 5-year-old kid who has nobody in the world is left in the streets of Malatya to beg for his food, what kind of character he has that gives him the motivation to keep going. I went through 2 years of college in Aleppo before going to medical school to Beirut, Lebanon. As you study medicine and you study the human body, you see the marvel that God has created. Regularly I would go to church. On Vartan, I went to church, and I don't know, doing my prayer, a girl comes in the pew in front of me, and she is really bothering me because she is doing signs with the mother who is on 2 aisles beyond that. But it's bothering me, I cannot pray. So somehow, I saw her face, and of course I liked her. So I walked out of the church, which I've never done before, to find out who this girl is. That's how I found out that this was Shogag Varshabedian, which God's will was to be my wife. I have always said that more important for a man, even beyond his diplomas and everything else, is his partner in life. Because if you have the right partner in life who can tolerate your weaknesses and your strength and stand behind you, besides you, then you have made it in life.
May he rest in peace, and may his life continue to inspire a multitude of potential Albert Schweitzers.
We got married in 1965, and I came to the United States, and I was for 1 year here in Hackensack Hospital. And later on, I went to Johns Hopkins to do my specialty in gastroenterology for 2 years. And when I was ready to come back and start practice in New Jersey, during the Vietnam War, I got drafted in the US Army. So for 2 years, I served in the US Army, and I was chief of Ireland Army Hospital in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Right after the Army, when They offered me this job to join the group in Indiana. When they were talking to me, the first question I asked them is, where is the Armenian church? And they looked at me and says, well, what do you mean, where is that? I said, you know, if there is no Armenian church around here, I would not come to join you. Fortunately, the Armenian church was like 20 miles from us. I feel very close to the church that nurtured me, and that is the St. Joachim and Anne Church in Palos Heights. The parishioners were so receptive and so kind to us from the beginning that we felt like home. And we got involved, and I was elected a delegate from our church and served for almost 20 years. December 7, I remember, it was around 11:30 midnight when we heard on the radio that Gorbachev was cutting short his visit and going to Armenia because there had been a massive earthquake. There was no way that I would and Shohag would sit on the sideline doing nothing. Credit should go to Shohag. She was the co-chair for fundraising for the earthquake. Chicago raised $1.6 million from the local community. And I cannot emphasize how much she did. If she does something, she does all the way. I've been in Armenia 27 times, and most of the time for charity. When Vicky went to Armenia for the first time and she saw the Armenian artists, she said, this is one of the things that we should do to promote the Armenian artists, to support the Armenian artists. I've learned a lot from her, I'll tell you. There is nothing that we do unless we consult each other. We bounce ideas from each other. And a lot of times we hold hands and then we decide this is the best thing, this is the best avenue that we should be doing. It was our 30th wedding anniversary, and I got a call from Khajak Sirpazan that he would like to have lunch with us. Khajak Sirpazan has always been close to our family, and I've always admired his spiritual character. So we went out to lunch, and Khajak Sirpazan said, you know, St. Nerses needs help. We need to raise $1 million. Within a short period of, I think, 3 months, Shohag was able to raise that $1 million for St. Nerses. When Khajak Sirpazan got elected as primate, he wanted me to join the diocesan council, but I was very busy at that time, I couldn't. But as my practice, I slowed down. I said, this is the time that I have to serve my church. I really stayed until the ripe age, you know, when I felt like that the young generation should start taking over. As the Board of Trustees, I feel like it is a very important function in advising the diocesan council. I think most important is the willingness to serve the Lord, to serve the church. For the election of Catholicos Karakin I and for the election of Karakin II. I was elected vice chair of the national ecclesiastical body, so it was just a phenomenal, an ethereal experience in reality. Catholicos Karakin I came to the official visit, pontifical visit to America. My relationship with him from 63 on until Aswatsokino Savore in 99 was a very close one. When we got married, he was a bishop at that time. He officiated our wedding. He baptized all our children. So he was going to do the Sunday church services at St. John the Divine. The night before, somebody had upset him, so he got an anginal attack. And they were going to take him to the hospital. He refused. He said, call Rafi. I said, don't bother him. Don't worry about his attack. It is a passing thing. It will be okay. So the next day, when he was going to do the church service, we wanted to be prepared. And I was at the side of the altar in case there was need for something. Serving on the altar was Der Karekin Kasparian. All of a sudden, Vehapar called Der Karekin and whispered something to him, and my heart started pounding. I said, he must be experiencing something. So Der Karekin came over to me, and my heart is racing as to what's happening, what is needed. So Der Karekin comes in and says, Vehapar wants to know, are you okay? I mean, this is the type of person he was. I will never forget my association with Karekin I. I mean, throughout the years, it's been such an inspiration to me that it just will go with me forever.
One of many important legacies left to us by Dr. Raffy Hovanessian is the medical educational program he has founded with Armenian American Health Professionals Organization and administered by Fund for Armenian Relief. Recently took place a charitable event organized by AAHPO's president Larry Najarian in his residence. The purpose of the event was to raise funds to further strengthen and expand Dr. Raffy Hovanessian's medical educational program and vision to help doctors in Armenia and Artsakh.
We're here because we are very fortunate to be able to help people that we will never meet or see. These are people of Artsakh, these are people in the villages, these are children, these are the elderly, these are people just like us who haven't been blessed to have access to care and physicians with the knowledge base that we have here. And what we have done together over 11 years is really train an entire generation of healthcare providers, physicians in particular, in the latest medical techniques. And each one of those physicians has gone back to Artsakh and are working in the villages and providing that critically needed care so that they have the same hopes and same desires that we do and can realize their dreams and when they're healthy. But beyond that, we have a team that's consulting with our field director in Artsakh several times a month, in addition to the emails that go back and forth, how to make this program better. And indeed, over 11 years since this program was given to us by the dream of Dr. Raffy Hovanessian, we've changed this program to the situations on the ground. As you're aware, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through wars, but this program is extremely resilient and has responded to pretty much every challenge that's been happening.
Programs Director Dr. Gevorg Yaghyan made a PowerPoint presentation highlighting current and future projects of the program.
And I remember very well, Rafi came across the table and he said, Gevorg, do we have a doctor from Artsakh and Javakh here? I said, no, unfortunately not. He said, why? I said, because we have a very limited fund and a far giving only for regional doctors. He said, I will talk with you in 2 weeks when I will be in the US. I will call you. So he called to my mobile phone and he said, I am going to the board meeting, AAHPO board meeting, and I will bring up to the board members that we need to increase the program and include, do you think it's possible? I said, yes, it's possible. He said, don't worry about this, I will do, and he did. So after that, from 2011, we have more than 250 doctors trained through AAHPO program. So we trained all these doctors during these 10 years. After this awful war, 2021, when all these doctors from Artsakh, they left their places, Mardagert, we have people from Shushi, everybody came to Armenia, and at that time we understand that bringing doctors from Artsakh to Armenia to be trained, it's very problematic because they're living their working places. We need this doctor there, so we decided to change our model, and we start taking one important trainer from Armenia, sending to Artsakh for working 1 month and train local doctors there working with them. Raffi Hovanessian Foundation helped this part of the program specifically starting from 2021 to keep this doctor there, giving their salaries, and also doing all these logistics. So our most efficient program was devoted to Dr. Raffi Hovanessian, and being him a gastroenterologist, and knowing that in Armenia we have a very high rate of colon cancer, pancreatic cancer from different reasons. Lung cancer is a #1 in a man. Second is a colon cancer, breast cancer #1 in a woman, and also uterus cancer. So we decided to devote one whole conference to the Raffi Hovanessian conference devoted to the gastroenterology. And you can see it was a 2-day conference. Incredible amount of the faculty all around the world. We have a director from Uruguay, a gastroenterologist, who just collect every famous doctor and Armenian doctors from US and Europe to do this conference. Another important conference is coming very soon. It's October 29-28, and it's devoted to our another good friend, Professor Edgar Hossepian. His family foundation decided every year during the 5 years through that fund which they allocated to the Arab Care Children Hospital to do conferences in the pediatric neurology. So ICPD as a platform will do this conference, and it will be success. More than 1,000 people already registered, so we'll continue doing this.
We got to be so thankful to Dr. Hovanessian. He not only helped us implement the program, he introduced us to our field director, he introduced us to the Fund for Armenian Relief, he introduced us to other doctors in Armenia and in Artsakh to help make the program work better, and he worked tirelessly to help seek funds and develop relationships, some of those relationships which are here today. We are so blessed to have his 2 daughters with us today. His wife Shohag is traveling, unfortunately couldn't be with us, but we got lucky. We've got Eileen and Ani joining us tonight.
Thank you, Larry. On behalf of the family, we'd like to thank both Magda and Larry for hosting this wonderful event. And you know, in our father's memory, we are unbelievably honored and grateful for all of you and all of the donors throughout the years who have committed and stood by our family to make my father's dream and the dream of many of you a reality. From a very young age, we were both taught that education is power. And so the idea that my father could bring together education and continuing medical education for doctors to help outreach, particularly in Artsakh, was very clearly articulated to us as a family, and even articulated at his very last days, when we spent a lot of time as a family, my mom, my dad, the children, the grandchildren surrounding my dad, and you know, even in his final days, he was talking about continuing medical education, and he made it very clear to us how important for him it was that we outreach to Artsakh, to villages, to places that would not get the same level of attention as perhaps, you know, the doctors in Yerevan and Armenia.
It really was such an important part of our dad's forethinking on even the day of his passing. We said, Dad, you know, should we think about expanding to other Armenian communities? And he said, Achchigas, medigere.
we have to help outreach in the places that need it most. Please focus your efforts, do everything you can with the AAHPO and help do and raise whatever it is possible to make a huge difference in all of these communities. And that's possible looking around today. And our mom is not here. Her heart is here. She's texting us and asking.
Texting all of you.
All of you. She's also with Setan Albanian, who Uncle Joren was such a huge integral part of AAHPO. And today they actually celebrated the 5th year passing of Uncle Joren, and they had a beautiful hooky hunkies together. So it's quite fitting that today we're all together celebrating such a beautiful tribute to what AAHPO has done, and hopefully will make a big impact going forward. Thank you to everybody.